So we're going to get started. So just a warm welcome to Chris Hood. Before we kind of get into some specific questions, I always ask authors that I interview on here, just maybe to start with a brief bio of yourself to kind of let people know who you are, just a few pieces of information before we get into some more specific questions.
Sure. That sounds great. Well, thank you all for tuning in. My name is Chris Hood. I am a strategist by trade. I have probably over 35 years of experience with customer experience types of organizations, spending time across customer success and building customer journeys. I have previously worked for companies such as Disney and Fox and Google. I have been in and out of the film, television, and video game industry. So I've worked on projects, everything from American Idol to Jurassic Park. So there's a couple of things in between there. This is actually my third book that we are going to talk about today. My first book was called Customer Transformation, and it was a 7-step framework for building customer-centric organizations for anybody who is into business types of conversations. I live in Orange County, California, and excited to talk more.
That's fantastic. Thanks for the intro. So you bring to this conversation so many different experiences, like you said, over, the past 30, 35 years, that I think it's really neat that you've written this book, and it's really timely. It's certainly, everyone's talking about it. And I think you have a really interesting perspective probably to share because of that past experience. And then, you can bring that up into the future. So the first thing I wanted to mention was just as a teacher, when I saw the cover of your book and you had typed some stuff in a doc, the teacher in me wanted to hover over the word and change the spelling. And then I was like, he's being clever, because I looked at the cover and I could see, the AI in there. So I thought that was a fantastic usage of that, really eye-catching. And I appreciated that you kind of used that sort of symbolically. You mentioned in your blurb on Amazon that there's sort of a growing ideology around AI that it's perfect, that it doesn't make mistakes. And so maybe you could start off just chatting a little bit about some of the greatest misconceptions about AI that you believe, the world or businesses have to overcome.
Yeah, well, I'll start with, you're not alone. I sent my book off to 2 editors, and both editors replied with comments, spelling mistake on the title. And I had to go back and say, no, this is intentional. And then once you explain it, they get it. And really, that's the whole purpose of this book, is that what I was seeing is this infallible belief in AI. And I wanted to kind of spin it to, well, really, if you put AI in the center of that mindset, you will eventually fail. And we got Infailable. So I still kind of am happy with myself that I came up with it. It's a clever play on what is really happening when we look at AI in our businesses and in our community. This belief system that AI has these incredible capabilities that are well beyond where the real capabilities are is mainly due to a combination of media, books that we read, movies like Terminator and Skynet, to what we are hearing in the news. And then add on top of that, all of the marketing hype to buy into this as the next big thing. It creates this belief system, this ideology that really we are nowhere near. And I wanted to focus on that as being the primary premise of the entire book.
That's fantastic. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because I think it's not just business, right? It seeps into all aspects of our life. Like you said, it could just be simply that, you're scrolling and you see a news story, and then you see an advertisement, and then, you have word of mouth conversations. And it's to the point where everyone is sort of saying, embrace this. So I hope through our chat, today, I'm sure there's the good and the bad, right? So maybe we can kind of illuminate what some of those are. But it seems like you, with your unique experience with, you said Google and Disney, where do you think this could be used effectively? So you've kind of like highlighted that there are some, obviously the downside that we trusted a little bit too much, but where could it be used to maybe have that more authentic feel?
Yeah, it's a great question because there are a lot of great case studies, uses, needs for AI. And we are seeing that more and more. For example, AI in healthcare or in research. Somebody asked me actually just yesterday, we were talking about could AI help us find the cure for cancer? And I said, absolutely. I could see the cure for cancer within, say, the next 10 years directly contributed to research that AI can help us accelerate. So there are plenty of really good, strong, purposeful use cases for AI. But on the flip side of that is we as consumers or we as individuals that are going through our daily lives, the challenge is that we are being bombarded and really in some cases being forced to use AI in ways that we may not want. So, I mean, anybody who has been to, say, a Taco Bell or maybe a McDonald's lately, if you're a fast food fan, you will be presented with an AI bot to take your order. And those types of implementations are actually turning consumers off, which is the point of the book, is how is consumer behavior, the daily lives of us looking at this. Now, in some cases, again, there's positive. We talk about companies like Amazon, where Amazon seems to always know what I need when I need it. And that personalization of that experience is all being powered by algorithms and AI behind the scenes. But there are other areas where it is becoming more detrimental to how we communicate with one another, how we engage from a human creativity perspective. We'll probably talk a little bit about writing since this is also about the book. When we begin to remove those human-focused elements from our lives and put it into the hands of AI, that becomes a challenge for us. So yeah, there are definitely very positive, incredible opportunities that AI can present for us. It's in terms of how we use it on a daily basis that really has to be researched more.
It's really interesting what you mentioned just about the automation in fast food, for example. It could be just because of where I am in Ontario. I've never gone into a fast food restaurant and had that experience where there's, a robot kind of taking your order. But I'm sure it's coming. And so it's really interesting because on the radio about 2 days ago, they were mentioning how our local Starbucks or the company in general wanted to bring back the handwriting on the cups. So handwriting people's names instead of it just being typed on a receipt. And then to that, they also said that the company wants to start adding personalized messages. Despite how that might add wait time, they think that personal touch is maybe going to help them recover some of their losses, over the last few years. So it's just really interesting to see both sides of it. We have some companies are testing it out, and then other companies are saying, we want to scrap this, or we want to, maybe adapt is a better word, because it wasn't effective, because that humanity was lost and people noticed it, and then sales, took a bit of a dive. So it's an interesting balancing act, but it's really hard to argue with something like you said, it could help with something as big as a cure for cancer. So while we might want to maintain that authenticity and humanity when it comes to our day-to-day lives, you don't want to eliminate it completely if it's going to be beneficial. So it feels like it's just a big balancing act, and none of us really know how to do that. Would you say that is probably pretty true right now?
Yeah, I think you're onto something. I think there's two sides of that. One, there's an educational level, which I think is really what you're touching on, is we because we don't necessarily understand AI fully, we don't necessarily then understand how we can leverage AI for those beneficial, choices. That's one thing. The other side of this, to use another example, if I go to a grocery store right now, I have a choice of self-checkout, or I can go and stand in line and talk to a real person. There's a lot of opinions about this. There's plenty of people who absolutely despise going through self-checkout. There's also a lot of people who love going to self-checkout because they don't want to actually talk to a real person. But the interesting situation, the scenario presents that you ultimately have a choice. You can pick how much human interaction you actually have in that engagement. What we are seeing is that AI is replacing that human engagement. If I am forced to use the AI, then I don't have really the opportunity to kind of make an informed decision on, is this the way that I would like to engage? So most people will start to move on to other businesses. Your point about Starbucks, I actually have in my book. One of the chapters talks about that very specific scenario, because we do see that human to human connection is stronger than a human to AI. And we're definitely not in a place where we're doing AI to AI, but there is conversation about, well, what if I had a personal AI agent and you had a personal AI agent and all they had to do was talk to each other? Well, yeah, that's sort of like, the family time sitting at the couch or at the dinner table where everybody's on their phones. And so this mindset has to be investigated a little bit more, because the more we understand what AI is capable of, where the benefits of that AI is, educating ourselves on recognizing the difference between marketing hype and reality, when we can better look at that and assess that, then we can make our own informed decisions, and we can start to ensure that we do not lose that human engagement element.
I think the element of choice, you mentioned that, and that's so true, because again, if you go into a store and it's all self-checkout, or 95% of it is, and they only have one lane, with a human, then that choice is being taken away. And I think that's when people, they become more disgruntled, right? Because they feel like they didn't have the choice, versus, hey, that person's in a rush, or they just aren't a people person, or whatever it may be. They feel like that option is for them. If it's equal to the other option, then it satisfies, everybody. Although, the whole controversy with theft and stuff like that with self-checkouts, there's obviously a business side. They have to consider that. But that element of choice, the problem is if it's taken away, then I don't know. I mean, that to me is a risky business strategy. Are there other risks, do you think, of adopting this other than, the couple that we've mentioned so far? What other risks could a company, possibly take on if they just blindly adopt this and implement it fully?
Well, it doesn't even necessarily have to be directly consumer based. Think about this from a healthcare perspective. If you went into your doctor and the doctor said, we need to perform surgery, and you do not have a choice as to who's going to perform that surgery. And somebody just says, hey, we've got this latest AI and the AI is really accurate, but we're going to have the AI perform the surgery for us. How would you feel? In most cases, I would assume that people would not like that choice, right? They would be looking for a second opinion. So it becomes very critical for organizations to start to recognize how they're going to adopt these different elements. And you mentioned sometimes there's a business case. Well, yeah, when you are implementing AI to reduce the amount of employees that you need, to reduce cost within your organization, but at the same time, you're increasing the cost of the product that the consumer is having. The challenge here is that, how are you going to maintain that customer relationship? How are you going to keep them happy? Because there are so many options. We are in a digital world now where it is so easy for us to quickly and rapidly and quickly saying, but quickly change to a different product. Like I can wake up, have one bad experience, and I'm immediately looking for something else as an alternative. Those are all challenges. And the Starbucks example is a critical. They're making that change because they realize that too much automation is detrimental to their bottom line. So when you start to think, well, we're saving money, but then you're also losing money, that's the problem you've got to have to kind of explore. And there is a balancing act in here. I've talked about that in my first book. I did actually put it again in my second book here, but talking about this balance between how much human engagement versus how much automation and AI engagement do you want to have, and somewhere in the middle, you will find the right balance for your customers. But you still have to ultimately start with, what do my customers want? What's the problem that I'm trying to solve for them? And then once you figure out what that problem is, then you can figure out what technology you want to implement to solve that problem. And in a lot of cases, it doesn't even have to be AI. There's plenty of other technologies that probably can solve the problem. The problem that we are seeing now is that people want to jump on the AI bandwagon and say, well, AI is out here, I'm going to use it, and then I'm going to shove it down everybody's throat and then figure out how I'm going to use it to solve people's problems. That backward, process is really the most detrimental part to any business.
Yeah, and I'm seeing it like everywhere, obviously, but it's really starting to infiltrate into the education sector too. So I'm a teacher, and it's now being added to basically every app and program that we use, that the board buys. So it's there, and whether you like it or not, kind of thing. You don't necessarily have to choose to use it, but it's there, always there in the background. And so I think that was something that they just kind of jumped on that and thought, well, this will make everybody's lives easier. But we can already see within about a year just some of the impacts that it's having. So I think your healthcare example was fantastic too, because that's the last thing I would want if I was going in for surgery. It would feel so sterile and impersonal, and probably scary. So I think you're right that they're going to have to come to terms with the fact that you cut the number of employees that you need and you save money. But if you end up, cutting your profits too at the same time, you're eventually going to have to readjust that. I think there's going to be a lot of mistakes made. It's going to be a time of how risky do you want to go? How many mistakes do you want to make before you figure out the balance? But your book kind of delves into that. And I think that's great for people to just be consciously thinking of that. I'd love to kind of talk about writing now, because you've got the book out, and that's one of the arts in general. So writing, art, all those kinds of creative fields, it's so controversial, and people have really strong opinions. So what's your opinion when it comes to that sort of area, when it comes to the use of AI?
Well, so I'm a teacher as well. And I did not include this in the book, but since you brought it up, I'll kind of mention it. I have been watching the use of AI in the educational system for about 2 years now. And for the classes I teach, which are bachelor degree college courses, I've noticed that there's a direct correlation to the increased use of AI has directly caused the decrease in letter grades. There's a one-to-one correlation. The more AI that is being used, the lower the grades have become. And so you start to wonder why. And a part of that is because, you would think, well, they're using ChatGPT or something. They're going in, they're having ChatGPT write for you, which is in a lot of cases what they're doing. The references and citations for those assignments are false, mostly because they're hallucinated by the AI. They're cutting and pasting that into their assignments. But that actually that's only part of it. Right? That's the result of using this. It's that they aren't comprehending what is actually being taught, right? Because if you just cut and paste it into your assignment, then you're not understanding it, you're not recognizing it. And what I'm seeing, even from a creative perspective, like creative writing or business writing, is when you're relying too heavily on something else to output it, then you're actually, not really doing the work, and that's part of the problem. What AI has created is really an opportunistic type of society that says, "Oh, I can write the next bestseller. All I have to do is fill in some of these things and boom, output a book. And here I've got a book." It might not be, well, it's not going to be a good book. There's probably a lot of copyright challenges that you're going to have to overcome. The U.S. Copyright Office has just recently, in the last week or so, come out and said that AI generated content is not copyrightable. So there are a lot of challenges, but at the end of the day, if you want to write a book, then go write the book. Don't let somebody else write it for you. We could put ghostwriting and stuff aside. But basically that's what you're doing is you're trying for the easy path to, output something and get it into a book format that in a lot of cases probably isn't even going to make sense. I am not a fan of it. I think there are some good use cases for AI in the writing process, character development, scenarios, brainstorming. If you've got a creative block right now and you need some additional concepts, like there's plenty of opportunities to leverage it. But at the end of the day, if you want to write a book, then you should be the one writing the book.
It's a great point. And in education, you touched on how grades go down because of it. And I've seen that too. And it's amazing how quickly that happened. Last year, the second semester at my school was the worst for that. It just, because I think there was such an interest in using it, but then they declined almost immediately. But it's interesting because it's at a time when grades tend to be inflated. There's a lot of pressure all around for grades to be high. So there's this real disconnect between not doing the actual work and having, AI do it for you, but expecting even a higher grade than you would have earned, say, 10 years ago. So it's really an interesting time. And, I've had to switch to almost all pen and paper just to see what students actually know. And I think it's a really interesting time we're in. But you mentioned authors, and I think there was something came out a couple weeks ago on X specifically, and it was a story of an author who published their book, but they left prompts in there, AI prompts. Well, of course, the readers saw that. They were furious. They said that they felt betrayed. They said they wouldn't read that author again. Obviously a huge gaffe, because it could have been, like you said, they just wanted to use it for a couple of scenes. I'm not a fan of doing that, but again, maybe that's what they were doing. But then that whole idea of authenticity, if I can't trust that this author wrote the book, there's lots of authors who have, and I want to support them. So it kind of became a public outcry on here. And from time to time, there's always these author controversies, but that sense of write the book yourself, like you said. And I think that's a valid kind of argument. The copyright thing too, as well. I mean, if you're using that in your writing, how much of that work is able to be copyrighted? I suppose nobody would know the percentage, right, of what you used was a prompt. So I don't know. It's a huge gray area right now. Are there any other questions that you think we should be asking before we just start using this technology?
Yeah, there is some challenge because identifying what was human written versus AI generated is not quite there yet. Like there's, and this is both sides. So I'll kind of touch on this as quickly as I can. But you've got the trying to identify what has been written by AI, and then you have the actual writing by AI. Okay. there are plenty of services and tools out there that claim that they can pinpoint if a particular item has been human written or AI generated. 100% of those do not work. This is a fallacy. This is an example of hype. This is an example of organizations out there trying to sell a product and get you to believe in a capability that is not there. And the same goes for the writing side. There are plenty of services out there right now that claim they will help you write an entire book. 100% of those are false. 100% of those companies are basically trying to sell you something that is impossible. The AI is not capable of doing it. The AI is, ChatGPT is perfectly capable of writing, say, a 5,000 word mini story. Sure, it can do that. But when we start getting into, a 300 page novel, there's no AI on the planet right now that is capable of writing that 300 page novel for you from start to end perfectly. And so by recognizing what it can and cannot do, we then as consumers will be able to go and say, well, wait a second. I have no idea of really, can I actually determine, from a copyright perspective, is this truly written by a human or written by something else? There's no way to really be able to, figure that out. And you could definitely have elements of your book written by AI, and because it can't be figured out, right? So we are in this kind of weird spot where the technology isn't quite there, but everybody is hoping that it is there, mostly so that they can make their lives easier. And so I think we still have a little ways to go to be able to do all of these things that people are hoping they could do.
Definitely, yeah. It's interesting. There's a I won't say the name, but it's a fairly reputable company that works with authors. So it's like it does promotions and so on, and they have a newsletter. And last week they put out their newsletter, and it was kind of like looking forward at trends. And one of their suggestions in it said 2025 trends was that all authors should embrace AI in some way, in their writing. And I just thought that was really interesting. Another author friend on X shared that, and I just thought that was so interesting that they were putting that out. And just coming back to everything that you just said and that other author's experience, it really feels like some companies are telling everybody to just embrace this 100%. And as you've pointed out in our conversation, there's sort of a side of this that you have to be cautious. And I think you've made that clear.
Yeah. I'll give you,
and there's so much gray area, right? But that was just, it really floored me when I read that last week. I thought, wow, to say that every author should be using this. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because, again, this is where the AI hype, the AI bandwagon is overshadowing what we should be saying, right? Writing organizations should be coming out and saying, don't use AI. It's bad, right? We have in the creative world, like even in television, film, video games. I mean, video games are starting to leverage more and more AI. And it's a creative industry. So you're displacing creatives all in name of furthering the agenda of AI, which is the completely wrong way to think about this. The other unfortunate side of this is that most authors, I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm going to say most authors have been using AI in their writing for the last 20 years. It's called a spell checker. And yet we don't seem to think of it like all of a sudden all of these other things have been powered by AI. But Grammarly is an AI-powered grammar checker. And only now in the last year do they have, hey, powered by AI. Well, you've always been powered by AI. That's what grammar checking is all about. And so this, again, is just an area where we have to start to recognize what elements are being overly hyped versus what elements are, factual and meaningful. And then we can figure out ways to adopt it so that it all makes sense.
100%. And I think with the Grammarly example, it's the perfect example actually of sort of how it becomes more and more hyped, because like you said, there's one thing between you write your entire book, your entire poetry book, sci-fi novel, whatever it is, and you use, back in the day, Grammarly, or if you were using Word or whatever your spell checker was, to just tell you if you spelled some words wrong or if you needed different punctuation, versus Grammarly now. I don't have it, but apparently it also will say, can I rewrite these sentences to sound better, to sound different? So
yeah,
that line again, it always seems to come back to that. At what point then is it not your own nuanced writing style? When you read certain authors, you can tell it's that author because they have a style, and a lot of their work, there's a progression over their career, but they still have a voice, that shines through in their writing. I just feel like AI then potentially makes all the books sound the same. They all would have that same nuance. And it's just different. It's different, and it's, that's why I'm not a fan, but again, maybe that's going to improve to the point where it sounds exactly like what I love to read. I don't see it.
Yeah. We could argue that a human editor may have the tendency of changing the voice of an author, right? I wrote a manuscript for a fantasy adventure, a young adult fantasy adventure. It has been in my computer for now like 6 years. I haven't gotten it right. I've had multiple editors on it, and what was funny is as I went from editor to editor just to give me more advice, it kept feeling like it was shifting back to what they thought it should be as opposed to what I really wanted it to be. So there is this fine line even between just the editing process and getting that voice out. And you're right. You start to leverage AI too much, everybody starts to ultimately sound the same. Now, you can tweak that. There are ways to tweak it, but it is very challenging, again, to not come across, and I did touch on this in my book, is basically come across as we're just cloning. It's just a copy paste exercise and regurgitating the same stuff to a point where it degrades everything meaningful of what we're trying to actually output.
And I think that's the thing. I find it difficult sometimes to articulate why this is upsetting me sometimes, but I think it's because if AI was helping me get my chores done and my housework, so I had more time to write and create, but that's not what's happening. It's now becoming that everyone can be an author, everyone is now an artist, play around with this tool. I don't know, like you said, there's just something, it's degraded that whole process. What I say is like that, just the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into any passion project, whatever that is. And the mundane stuff is still there. Maybe one day there'll be robots, cleaning up my house. But right now I still have to slog and do all of that. So I feel like the author thing was a niche that I loved. And that's why I write, because I love it. Yeah. And now I feel like it's being marketed that, hey, everybody can do this. Everyone can operate now. Everybody can make art. But that mundane stuff is still there. So I feel like we didn't get it right. We haven't got it, right yet. Yeah. Final comments, Chris, just on your fascination with AI, your book, before we wrap up.
What would you like to hear?
I'm kind of curious just about your interest to write the book, because I have all of these thoughts on AI, but I've never sat down and written a book on it. So kind of walk me through the process of, you've researched it, you have all of these ideas, but to decide to do this, what kind of instigated you to go to that point where you put a book out on it?
Yeah. The opening line of my book says, I should have written this book sooner. And I look at that, and I was actually on a panel discussion, similar to like what we're doing right now, but it was a panel and everybody was praising AI, and I just was kind of feeling I was in the twilight zone, like almost as if everybody had this, we'd say ideology, this belief system in AI that it could do no wrong, almost a religious nature, and how much they were worshiping AI. And I just started seeing the hype and the amount of false advertising and misunderstandings, and I had to sit down and write something that brought a different perspective to the conversation, where we shine a light more on the reality. I'm not sure if any of you who are listening has seen this commercial. It's by Salesforce, and it has Matthew McConaughey sitting in the rain outside, getting drenched. And the whole premise is that if he would have had an app that had AI on it to tell him, then he wouldn't be sitting out in the rain. Now, this commercial, although you could argue, well, it's funny, it also paints this picture that we as a society are stupid people. Like we can't see that it's raining ourselves. Like we are so dependent upon AI to make decisions for us that we are even willing to sit out in the rain and wait for the food, let alone that the restaurant that we're at is too dumb to realize that it's also raining, and we're willing to seat us outside. This concept that we are generating these problems where there are no real problems, in suggesting that AI is going to solve these non-problems, is the reason I wrote the book. Like, when you believe in something so much that you are willing to sacrifice your own human intelligence as part of your day-to-day lives, that I think needs to be recognized. And so a lot of my book is really comparing various forms of artificial intelligence with various forms of human intelligence to demonstrate how they are in some ways compatible, but in other ways, where the human intelligence is always going to win out. We talk about like emotional intelligence. There's no AI on the planet that understands emotions, right? We talk about aspirations. We talk about behaviorism, intrapersonal relationships. All of those things are uniquely human. And I just felt that I needed to write a perspective that took AI out of this godlike belief system and put it more into a reality that we and the readers could more better understand and be able to hopefully come away with it with not just a better understanding of the AI, but also an understanding of how their human and our collective human intelligences can support us better as we move into the future.
I think that's great, because while you're recognizing that it's been around, in our lives for years, you're not saying no completely. And I think any extreme, is we have to be kind of, careful with that. You said it does have a purpose, and you mentioned in the health field and so on. But I love how your book really is digging into those areas and kind of just, unpacking it a bit and questioning it a bit. And I think that's a really good thing. And in some ways, I think that's what could be lost if we embrace things like this without thinking. Our world seems to be doing that more and more, because you think, well, AI comes around and then it's being pushed by every sector. It feels like the right thing to do, right? Those of us who, when it first started, were the small group saying, let's not do this. The voices around you get louder and louder, and there's more of them. So it becomes harder to sort of articulate that. But it's nice to hear people like you who are really thinking critically about it and asking questions. And I think that's good for all aspects of life, to just question it. Why is everyone embracing it everywhere all at once? Probably because they want to be the ones to create it and financially gain from it. But I find it really interesting that, that you said it sort of has this religious like fervor. And I don't know, I agree with you 100%. I don't know if any of the listeners have questions. I noticed some really neat comments in the replies, but if anyone does have a question or wants to speak, please just request to do that, and I can grant you the speaker status there. But if not, my final question is, where do we go from here? If you want to leave us with any kind of advice or wisdom or final thought, what would it be?
Yeah, I think you touched on it when you were just, sharing the last piece there, which is, I don't think AI is the exclusive blame, but we as society, a community, the human race, our critical thinking skills are drastically declining. And AI is unfortunately making it worse. When we believe what we read, as being infallible, and that's also the play on the words, we're in for trouble. And so I think a lot of what I write is to help people to think and force them into that critical thinking process, that there's more to this than just, what you're reading. I had somebody on LinkedIn share something, and I responded with, none of this is truthful. Like, none of this is real. And their response was, well, are you saying that all of the major tech companies and all of the major investors in this space, are you saying they're all wrong? And I had to say, well, yes, but ask yourself, why would you think that they are the ones promoting it? And if you can answer that question, then you can start to understand why there is so much hype around this. I put it as no different than the gold rush of the 1800s, no different than the pet rock phenomenon of the 70s. Like, we are selling a bill of goods that is only meant to benefit the individual selling it. And so if we can get better or return to some fundamental critical thinking skills and recognize that the human imagination, our individual and unique compassion, if we can focus on those elements, then I think we are better prepared to help us define how AI can be used more purposefully for our lives.
Fantastic final comments. It's very inspiring, and I think it just reminds me of so many conversations I've had with not just authors, but people in general, even, like we said, students, and just the whole idea of critical thinking. It's almost like it's becoming the new propaganda, I guess, if you will, for lack of a better word, right? And you said you have to question, well, who put the message out? Well, they obviously have a vested interest in getting us to believe a certain thing. So fabulous chat. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'll edit up the video and share it on all my different sites. And thanks so much, Chris, for taking the time.
I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, have a good rest of your day.
You too.